So we're here today to speak to anyone that's interested in a career in accountancy, because sometimes it's hard to understand actually what goes on in professions and what the job actually means. So we're hopefully going to break it down for you a bit this morning. I thought I'd start by saying, who am I? So I actually joined A4G straight out of school in 1999, which was quite a long time ago. I qualified as a chartered accountant in 2005, made partner at the firm in 2009, then joined the management board in 2011, shortly before I had my son. So I had my son in 2013, and then came back and seemed to have been landed with head of HR for a while. So I don't know if that was my punishment for having a child, but kind of worked through various roles within the management board as well as the practice, as well as dealing with clients, which is quite nice because it means I get to see it from my client's perspective in terms of managing a business. And I became deputy managing partner in 2016. So I'm involved in sort of covering the office and making sure there's no big fires and keeping staff and clients happy. So I thought I'd talk through kind of what I do as an accountant. Now, there's two kind of very distinct things we do as accountants. I think particularly in this practice, we have what we call our compliance services, which are all the services that businesses have to complete to stay compliant and not get in trouble themselves, but is often the stuff that they begrudge paying for a little bit. So at my level, my role in that is, so we look at reviewing accounts and the impact. So our accounts team will pull together a set of final year-end numbers, and I will look at those compared to the previous year and raise any concerns with the clients that I've got in terms of profitability or the amount of money that they're earning, or where it looks like they've got, budgets that are out of control, and then give them some advice on the accounts letter on that. I often give clients advice on bookkeeping and VAT. Sometimes that's on what VAT they can claim, but quite often with the bookkeeping, it's like how you organise yourself. So bookkeeping is like day-to-day records, sales invoices, purchase invoices, dealing with the bank account and payments. So I work alongside clients in terms of actually getting them into good habits. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it takes a little bit more nagging. But, that's quite fundamental to how they run their business. And then once our great personal tax team have pulled together individuals' personal tax returns that we've just finished a load at the end of January, I will review those for the purpose of, are they factually correct, and are people taking the right amount of money, maybe in the right tax year, just to make sure people are using all their allowances officially. And then I am looking at planning. So, I might be looking at husband-wife situations where the husband's a high rate taxpayer and the wife's not. And actually the husband's got all the investments in his name and he's being taxed on high rate tax on savings interest or something. You move it across to the wife to save money. So there's all sorts of things we do as part of that process, but it's really looking at it from the client's point of view, and how that's impacting them and their home life. And then obviously I work with a lot of growing businesses. So at a point, they will hit an audit threshold. And an audit is, once you've breached those thresholds, that's quite an important point for a business. And it is important that you do complete an audit in the year you kind of breach those thresholds. Otherwise, they can be in a lot of trouble. So we work with a lot of clients on some of the decisions they make about their business and how that might impact those. So recently for a client, they've set up a different group structure, and actually what it has done is it has brought it into a group. So then we've got to look at consolidating the accounts so that basically we're adding it all together and presenting it, and then because of that, all the different 4 companies' turnovers combined then breach the threshold. So it's really important that I keep people out of trouble, and just give them the best advice we can. But as I say, generally that's the stuff that they have to do. Other than a bit of the tax planning, it's not that exciting to business owners. Whereas the other side, and probably where I spend 90% of my time with clients, is actually what we call our value-added services. Now, those include startup business advice from, someone walking in here with a good idea, and me helping to assess whether, whilst it might be a good idea, have they got the right funds behind them to make that successful, and grow that business. Or we'd look at company and personal tax planning and sort of wealth planning as a family. So it is important that for anyone running a business, that it doesn't just work for them, it does work for their entire family. Because I think business owners make quite huge sacrifices, really, in terms of the hours they work, and time they spend at home when they're growing businesses. And it's just making sure that they're getting the rewards from that. And then a lot of what I encourage businesses to do is management accounts and looking at management information. Now, what management accounts are is they are basically smaller sets of accounts throughout the year. I think in my mind, the idea of doing a set of accounts at year end, sort of 12 months after you've started trading for that year, and then you've often got 9 months to submit those. So if you're a business that's submitting them right up against the deadline, you're looking at such historic information that it's a bit irrelevant, and that's where it doesn't have value. Whereas management accounts, you would run, and a lot of my successful clients run them monthly. And so they are, on the 10th of the next month, they're looking at the activities and profitability of the previous month. And it just allows them to make really good, informed decisions all the time to drive profitability. And then we do look at strategic planning with clients. So sometimes that might be how they bring employees onto the ownership structure of the business, or if they've got two quite different trades within one company, we'll look at how we split that. Or it might be succession planning for family businesses where you're trying to pass assets down. All sorts of things, really. I mean, strategic planning can often be the thing that is limiting the business's growth, and that could be staffing, it could be premises. So it really is sort of diving into how the business is doing and where they want to go and what might stop them. So it's quite good. That's the side I love, because I do take a really keen interest in how businesses are doing and how they're growing and how I can impact that. And then we work with clients on cash flow management and advice. Now, sometimes that can be in a positive way and sometimes it can be in a negative way. So over the pandemic, it was very much about there not being a lot of money into businesses that were closed, and how do we sort of stretch the cash that they'd got, what were the real essentials, and what things needed to be cut. And then on a plus side, we look at cash flow modelling. So it might be, okay, if I employed 2 members of staff and train them for 6 months, and then they could achieve X amount of sales, what would that look like from a cash position? And really, cash is king when it comes to businesses. Quite often, really great businesses can fail if they've got poor cash management. So I think one of the most important things we do is really looking at the cash flow modelling. And then we look at profit improvement with clients. So profit improvement is sort of typically we'll look at, okay, I think for businesses, quite often they go straight to their overheads. Can I save a little bit of money on my electricity, or do I need to spend as much on marketing? Which is a common mistake. And actually, what we do is we look at the impact of pricing decisions on the bottom line. I think over the last budget, there were some quite significant tax changes. And one of the things we did in an event of ours that's actually available on our website is we worked the tax changes back all the way through to the turnover. And actually, for some businesses, that meant they needed to increase their turnover or gross profit by 26% to get the same net profit result. And that's quite powerful and quite important for people to make informed choices. And then, as I said earlier, we do look at organising the finance functions, putting in safeguarding, so there's dual approval for payments above a certain level, or where they've got internal bookkeepers and we need to finish off kind of that to a high standard and turn it into management information and then present it to the directors. So quite often we have finance functions of businesses kind of reporting to us as accountants because we know what we're looking for. And then we will present that to the business owner in terms of what they care about most. So who are A4G? We pride ourselves on being all about the advice and not just the numbers. So as an accountant, I think we're a bit different to traditional accountants. We really enjoy working with growing businesses and the challenges they face. And it's not necessarily, as I say, just about the numbers. It is really understanding the business owners and why they went into business in the first place. And I think quite often we're the first person in a long time to ask them that and to really want to understand what they're trying to get out of it at the end. You know, that might be to hand it down to family, it might be to sell for a certain value because that's what they need to retire on. And that's really critical for us to understand. And the numbers from an accounts don't tell you that. So between our firm, we've actually got 32,668 years of collective experience. And the way we do that is we have grown our team and recruited at 18 every year. So for those watching the presentation, we actually think you guys joining accountancy at 18 is really critical as a business model for accountancy practices, because you can learn and train on the job and work your way through and get really good hands-on experience. Now, I'm sure many of you might look at me and think, I'm not sure she was ever 18. So I thought we'd travel back in time a bit and I'd introduce you to one of our trainees who is on the start of that journey with us and can tell you in her own words sort of where she's at. So over to you, Jess.
Hello everyone, so I'm Jess. I started my journey with A4G in 2022, straight out of sixth form, like many of you will be. Started my studies in July 2023 and I'm currently completing my level 3 AAT qualification. When I started at A4G, I jumped straight into personal tax, which is where our trainees do begin as a personal tax specialist, which does consist of contacting clients to collect tax return information, preparing tax returns, and just gaining that general tax knowledge that you will need. Shortly afterwards, I progressed to personal tax assistant, which is more of a higher level tax work. It's a bit more of a leadership role, so I gained my time and organisation management skills from that role, which actually set me up quite nicely once I transitioned into a junior client manager assistant, which is actually currently what I'm doing now, as well as a bookkeeping specialist. So that's who I am. So I'm now going to touch on a little bit of what you really need to know. So a huge misconception when I was always in school is that you couldn't be an accountant if you weren't good at maths. That's completely untrue. You do not have to be amazing at maths. Accountancy in general, like Emma touched on earlier, it's not just about the numbers. It's not just about crunching numbers. So do not be put off if you're not an A-star in maths, because accountancy actually dives a lot more into problem solving rather than actually calculating figures. Another huge misconception, a lot of people would think of accountancy as quite a boring job, but we're constantly learning new things, building relationships with so many different clients, working in different departments. It's not the typical boring office job. So, and plus it actually gives you a lot of excellent life skills for yourself and your own financial well-being. Also, a career in accountancy allows you to jump straight into the job and start studying with no expertise or certifications. Everyone has to start somewhere. Once you're a school leaver, you have to start somewhere. Joining in an accountancy firm and being in that industry will actually set you up quite nicely, and you get paid whilst you're learning at the same time. And of course, some of you may be thinking,
yeah, I didn't get up until 7:40. I opened my eyes and I'm like, oh, my alarm doesn't seem to have gone off.
You're lucky you got up before 7:40.
So a lot of you may be thinking that university is actually not the route for you, and that's perfectly fine. by joining our accountancy firm or just choosing a career in accountancy, you actually get paid whilst you're learning, and you actually avoid the debt. As well as that, you get the experience on the job. You get to learn every day. Especially if you're in practice, you're alongside professionals every day. So you're learning something every day, and you're avoiding debt. Of course, accountancy is a good money saver. It's a stable income, stable job. I know in this generation, a lot of people want to do something a bit more creative, like social media is now a big thing, influencing YouTubing, but actually accountants are never ever not going to be in demand, and you're never going to stay in one place. You're always going to grow, and you're always going to progress. And like I touched on earlier, it provides you with the life skills you need after school. I know firsthand how hard it is actually to leave school. You step out into the big wide world. It's so hard to transition from a school environment to a full-time work environment. But honestly, the actual principles that you learn in accountancy will benefit you so much. Like when you get older, you're going to need to buy a house eventually. Being an accountant actually helps you budget your money. It helps you make those financial decisions, and it just sets you up quite nicely for when you grow older. So now that I've covered what you really need to know, I think I'll touch on what you actually do as an accountant, as a trainee accountant. So when you start off with A4G, we basically like to give you multiple roles. We take this approach because it helps you expand your knowledge across all different departments, instead of just focusing on one restricted area. When you first start with us, like I touched on earlier, you'll be a personal tax specialist, and then possibly the assistant. You get the bookkeeping specialist, which is doing bookkeeping for all different clients. It really, really does help you understand the basic principle of a business and how they run and what we need and stuff like that. So we actually have more of our internal roles, such as sales ledger clerk and billing assistant. I think these roles are actually so amazing for helping you. It prepares you for being a client manager. We have all these roles to help you prepare to be an accountant, but as a client manager, you do need to know the internal things to help you manage your clients. We have our Xero specialist. Xero is actually the software that we mainly use in our firm alongside Iris. Being a Xero specialist helps you understand how it works. If a client was to ever ask you a query on their Xero, bang, you know what to do. And then you have our P11D specialist. I know many of you are probably sitting there thinking, Jess, what's personal tax? What's bookkeeping? Especially what is P11D? But that's the whole point of accountancy. You learn the new things that you're never going to know before, and it gives you that experience. So that's what you'll be doing if you join as a trainee accountant. I'll pass back on to Emma so she can go in a bit more depth about the different career paths that you can do.
Wonderful, thanks, Jess. I mean, I think the thing Jess touched on is actually, at A4G, we feel like, with the way accountancy is going and the technology, things like Xero have really good AI built into them, which makes like basic bookkeeping processes really much more streamlined. So a job where, but back when I was in junior, you'd have a pile of invoices and you'd have to manually type all the data into a software. Now, obviously, you can scan that invoice, the information's pushed through to the software. So the idea about getting, a really well-rounded experience is so that you can really properly advise clients and businesses how to operate and the things that they need to know to keep themselves compliant. So I thought I'd talk to you a bit about the different career paths, because obviously we are from a medium-sized accounts practice and there are alternative career paths. And I think it is very important, if you are making a decision about your future career, that you consider all of them and try and get as much work experience as you can. The one thing I found is I thought I wanted to be a banker in London, and I went and tried that and it just wasn't for me. I think probably the travelling and just being a little fish in a big pond just didn't suit my personality. But if I hadn't done the work experience, I wouldn't have known that. So really do get as much work experience as you can. So as I said, like there's small, sort of medium and large size practices. In small and medium-sized practices, as a trainee, you would tend to work around different departments and get rounded experience. In some of the bigger practices, you tend to go in as like an accounts trainee or an audit trainee, and that is your path within those practices. What we mean about industry is really working for businesses in their accounts department. Now, again, that might be smaller businesses all the way through to, really large businesses like Sainsbury's and things, but they would have a huge accounts department. Now, within there, again, you tend to be brought in for a role. Like Jess said, you can have sales ledger assistants where you're just processing sales data, or purchase assistants where you're just processing purchase invoices and dealing with the payment side. And then there are different levels of roles. So within industry, you might have an accounts assistant, you'd have an accountant, you'd have a management accountant potentially, a financial controller that has a bit more of an overall view of the management accounts and cash flow that I talked about earlier, all the way through to a finance director. And the way it tends to work in practice is, as Jess said, she's a trainee accountant at the moment. Her path is working towards being a client manager, where you have a portfolio of clients that are your clients to look after. So you're the caretaker for all their affairs, making sure everything's working well, that they understand how to keep their records, and the tax planning that the partner on the affairs has suggested that that's all implemented properly. So that's, client manager is a really important critical role for clients, and quite often they spend more time with the clients. So, and that's lovely. Or you can sometimes sort of have a slightly different path where you might become like a head of a department or become a specialist at that point. So there's a whole host of sort of career paths there, even as an accountant, and it's important for you to explore those. But I certainly don't regret mine. So hopefully you'll all be making the right choice for you. But I thought we'd talk you through the study routes. So the advantage of coming from school is obviously you continue your studies, which are really important, whilst earning some income. And we look at the first sort of 3 years, you do an accounting technician course. Now, that gives you a really good fundamental understanding of sort of profit centres within business, personal tax, business tax, accounting principles. And that is more sort of degree level accountancy training. And then you'd go on potentially to do sort of the ACA or ACCA, which is more like a master's type qualification, where often that's 3 years, quite committed work, where you're learning things in a bit more detail. But it's a good path to follow. It certainly meant that, I earned well while my friends were at university. And it's so nice to be able to learn on the job, because then you can help put it all into perspective. But there are some other qualifications, which are sort of CIMA, which is more a management accountant's qualification. ATT, which is a tax technician qualification, the same as CTA, is a more advanced tax qualification, a very tax specialist qualification. So I thought it was important to put those out there. And we've listed some of the training providers that tend to deal with those courses. So we have a lot of students that work with First Intuition or BPP or Kaplan, where they'll do classroom courses and online courses. And often you're in a room full of people that are all going through the same thing as you, which is nice because you can ask for help when you need it. And the tutors are brilliant in terms of answering your queries and going over areas that you're struggling with. But I think it's really nice to feel that you're not necessarily just going to work and you haven't got that, I guess, driven qualification and study embedded. So I think that was quite useful in accountancy, that you do have that. And it often doesn't stop there. Once you're qualified, you have to keep up your experience and learning. So I think the bit you're probably most interested in, I certainly was almost, okay, where do the salaries sit for, for someone in this profession. So we've given some examples of sort of practice salaries versus industry, and the different levels there. So obviously by the time you're qualified, which is sort of anywhere between 6 years, 6 years if you're all first time exam passes, and you could be looking at £40,000 plus. And the beauty of the trainee and part qualified packages is, whilst that is the salary level, depending on what firm you're with, you're also awarded time for study, and your study costs are paid for along with your exams. So that's quite good, and it's nice to have that extra benefit as part of those packages. And then I think the big difference really you tend to find is in industry, sometimes obviously they're quite, they're quite straight structures. So to move from a finance apprentice to an assistant to a manager, you might find you have to job hop a little bit to, have a vacancy at a different business, because if you've got someone above you that's only a few years older than you, or even 5-10 years older than you, they might not be going anywhere. So you might get stuck. So it's quite important to understand that, in that space, you tend to see a lot of job movement. Whereas I think if you pick the right accountancy practice, there should be a path all the way through. I mean, as I said in my first slide, I've been at A4G for nearly 25 years. No 1 year has ever been the same. And I've been able to carve out my own path while being here. We certainly have a sort of mantra here that we wouldn't like to lose staff through lack of opportunity for them within the practice. So we put quite a lot of pressure on our partners to grow their client bases, to allow for people to progress through, because that's really important for us, because we've been on that journey and people did it for us. So I think that's the beauty of industry with practice, is that you can, kind of work your way through there. And actually, when you get to partner level, your earnings are kind of dictated by your ability, because very much, how I'm remunerated as a partner is based on my client base, the work I do for them, which the more value-added services you do for clients, the better paid you are, because it's, sort of value price in there, and the how you recover your time on clients. So I'm quite lucky that I've got quite an established client base that I do consider as my sort of professional friends, and we work together to grow their businesses, and that has a knock-on impact on my earnings. So we do take on trainee accountants every year. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what it might mean to be an A4G trainee, feel free to, get in touch. We've got our closing date is the 1st of March for our recruitment. And then we have an event where we invite people to the office to get a better feel for the practice. And then we shortlist candidates and conduct interviews and make offers in sort of May, June time. So, we love growing, and we love investing in students, because that was my journey. That's a number of our staff's journey into accountancy. And actually, we always find, there's things we teach trainees, but there's also stuff trainees teach us. So it keeps us young as a practice. So I'm going to open it up to any questions that anyone has. We did have some questions sent in. So if I start with those, just to cover off some of the things that you might be thinking, but we'd love to hear from you, and we're happy to talk these things through. Okay, so the first question, I might get Jess to answer this because it's a bit fresher in her mind than mine. So how do you help yourself, and how did A4G help you adapt from a school environment to a work environment?
I would say A4G had such a good support structure in the firm. Obviously going from school and constantly having a teacher there to help you, and going into a work environment, it's quite hard. But with A4G, we take such a good approach. We have team leaders, which are basically it's like your support person. You go to your team leader about any concerns you have about anything, and they will be able to help you. You're not just chucked into the workplace and you're left alone and you don't know what you're doing. You constantly have that support. And you also will have a training and development manager. She will be there to solely support you and your self-development within the industry, within the firm and the career. That includes like studying. If you're struggling with your studying and your exams, let them know. If you're struggling with workload and you think, oh, I might have a little bit too much on right now, you always have them to go to. As well as that, you're not isolated. In A4G, we're so tight-knit and we have our little pods that we sit in, which actually it helps with the social aspect, having a little chit chat throughout the day whilst you're working. So really, it's not too different from school, apart from the fact that there is a lot more responsibility within it.
Yeah, and I'd say, I mean, probably in the first few weeks, we get a little bit of eyes drifting out the window at 3:30, so school bell time. But I think they said that it's almost like that's the time people take a walk around the office, refresh themselves, get a drink, and just champion on for the next couple of hours. But I think what I liked about it always was the fact that there are study days built in. So it's all not, there is a level of study that needs to go on outside of your working hours, but it was nice to have days where you could go on the study courses without having to try and do it in the evening after you've been learning quite a lot during the day. So the other question was, is working as an accountant boring? I mean, I think I joke sometimes at board meetings that I long for a boring day, because sometimes it is nice to have a quieter day where you can catch up with things. But certainly in the period I've worked for A4G, no one day is the same because we're dealing with different clients, different problems, and you're learning different things in different departments. But Jess, what would you say?
I especially think your school leavers, you're all turning 18, you're like, oh, how do I work, study and have fun? Well, don't worry. A4G is so, we're so tight knit and the social aspect is so good. We love our office nights out and the famous Christmas parties we have every year. Like everyone has such a good time and we make so many good memories that we'll be laughing about in the office for the next couple of months afterwards. So alongside just being an accountant, it's not boring, but also working with A4G isn't boring as well because you actually do build such good relationships with each other in the firm.
Yeah, I think they're quite good, aren't they, at supporting, that everyone supports each other with study and personal lives, and we do have a bit of a laugh and a joke. And Jess even lets me attend the after Christmas after party. So that's my one Peter Pan moment of the whole year. So remember what it's like to go into clubs. But no, it's good fun. So Jess, you mentioned bookkeeping, and I'm sure a lot of people were thinking, what is bookkeeping?
So bookkeeping in a nutshell is basically making sure that everything that we have from the clients, such as sales invoices, purchase invoices, all comes together. We use Xero. It's basically for their VAT return. If a lot of people don't know what VAT is, it's the 20% added on to everything that you buy. And basically businesses can either reclaim that, which happens most of the time, or actually in some circumstances we can actually do the bookkeeping, run a VAT return and be like, oh, they actually do need to pay a little bit more to HMRC. So the bookkeeping is making sure we're up to date with all the statements, all transactions are legit, basically making sure nothing dodgy is going on. And it basically just helps maintain the business, make sure that everything's running properly. And as a bookkeeping specialist, that's what you will be doing. Whether that's quarter, month end, year end even, and it's all for different unique clients, so you get really good experience with that actually.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? Because you start to build a picture of what people spend money on and how they make money on certain elements of what they do better than others, and just have a nosy at what people try and put through their accounts, because that's always quite funny. You know, we did have a child's nursery once try and put a bottle of whiskey for a week, and I could kind of understand it, but obviously wasn't allowable. So you do get to understand the people behind the business. And
there's a great question on the chat from Tilly.
Excellent.
Do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, yeah, perfect.
Or Tilly, would you like to come off of mute and read it out for yourself? Guessing that might be a no. I'll go for it. She has written, when applying for the trainee accountant job at A4G, what sets you apart from the rest? What are you looking for from a person?
Absolutely.
Brilliant question, by the way.
Yeah, that is a really brilliant question. And I'd say for us, it's very much about sort of personality, drive, organisation, because we can teach the skills of accountancy. It's the problem solving, it's the being able to talk to clients, and it is that sort of personality that you'll bring to the practice. It's really important for us. So
Right.
yeah.
Tilly, if you don't mind, could you send me a personal message to let me know what school you're from? And then that will just come to me if you go into the chat and just pop it as where it says meeting group chat. If you could just do the drop down and just do it to Louise. If is that on there? Yeah, there should be an option that you just send it to me and then just let me know what school you're at. That'd be fabulous.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. But I'd say even if you're not sure about a career in accountancy, come along, go to open events, do some work experience, come to our trainee event. We cover things in a bit more detail. We also do some things like speed interviews and little one-to-ones and group exercises that are a lot of fun and help prepare you for, other situations you might be in. So it's definitely worth attending if you're thinking about it. So Jess, you also mentioned personal tax. Do you want to run through the process that we have to go through for clients?
Yeah, so in personal tax, it's basically collating all the income and maybe expenses from the client, putting them all together in a tax return, and in a nutshell, it's the income tax that they pay on their income. Within A4G, when you'll start off this way, and it's about 6 months up until our busiest period in January, which is a beautiful time. I think you agree, Emma. And it basically just, I think it sets you up because tax is everywhere. We have our little motto, there's two certain things in life, and that's death and taxes. So within our firm, we have our personal tax specialists, which will collate all the information. We also have the personal tax assistant, which is more on the outside scope of things, helping, putting in the input and so on. And I think that also sets you up for when you move up and you have to actually review tax returns, like Emma said earlier, and when you start doing the tax planning eventually, when you get to the PA and stuff like that. So it's quite a good foundation, I think.
And I think you learn how to be polite to clients when chasing them as well, don't you? I think, I've probably heard Jess on the phone say, remember I spoke to you, a couple of weeks ago and a couple of weeks before that, can you just give us your stuff? Pretty please, to help you. So she does a brilliant job of that. But it is always quite a good skill where you've got to be, learn to be persuasive and explain to the client why this is something that you're trying to help them achieve, and the penalties they might get if they don't do it on time. So you definitely got to learn to be a bit of a negotiator, haven't you?
Yeah, and I think that applies also to HMRC.
It does. Yeah, it does. Yeah, you have to be on the phone to them to make sure you're getting the information and your queries answered as quickly as possible to keep it moving.
Yeah.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's to Jess. Bearing in mind, obviously, a lot of the young people on our call here are either in year 13 or finished. Did you know at their age what you wanted to do? So when you're in year 12, year 13?
I knew from year 9 that I wanted to be an accountant, but I knew a lot of people who didn't. And the one thing I will say is, like I said earlier, don't put it off because of what other people are saying. Like Emma said, attend the open evenings, have a look, see if you like it. Because you're not going to know if you like it or not until you try it. But yeah, I did know, which actually helped me, especially if you do know you want to be an accountant. I would definitely have a look into looking at the right work experience for you as well. What actually might look a little bit good on your CV for when you apply.
How do you think you knew? Is it what you thought it was going to be?
I think I knew because I always had quite little problem-solving brain. I was quite good at maths, and I knew that also within accountancy we're always helping people, and I knew I wanted to help people, so why not apply the knowledge I had to helping people. It is different to what I expected slightly in terms of I was one of those people that thought you had to be brilliant at maths. I walked in thinking, or is this going to be for me? But especially joining A4G, they've helped me so much, and they that step by step hold your hand and make sure that you're comfortable and you know what you're doing. And there's also always training on the job, so you're always learning. So yeah.
You
No,
spoke
and I'll
about
be honest, Louise, I didn't know that I wanted to be an accountant. I knew I liked money. I was a squirreler. So, you know, I had jobs at 15, 16, 17. I'd squirrel away little pots of money to save for a TV or a car, or that was kind of, I just liked squirreling money away. So I knew I liked money, which is why I went to banking, because I thought banking sounded good. My cousin was in banking. And then the job at A4G came up, and it was very local to my house. I had to flick through the CVs that were in the envelope from school, so I knew who I was up against, which is terrible, isn't it? But and I thought, well, I knew I liked the idea of university, but I didn't like the idea of communal bathrooms, I'm afraid. And I was a bit of a mummy's girl. I still am, actually. At my age, I'm still a mummy's girl. But so I was like, actually, a job where I was studying and local, and I got to still live with my mum, was quite useful, really, for me. And I was lucky enough to find a firm that everything was different, and if I reached my comfort zone, my boss had pushed me past it and forced me to learn something new. And then I just developed that sort of mindset, really, of constantly learning and developing. So yeah, I think I was just lucky.
Brilliant. Just one quick follow on from something Jess said, and then there's two brilliant questions in the chat. Jess, you said about sort of problem solving skills. Obviously, you said you liked maths, but you had these problem solving skills. What other skills do you think would be good to be able to do this role well?
Definitely good time organisation management skills. You're definitely going to need that, especially in our busiest periods. You need to stay on top of things, especially when you move up and you actually start managing clients. You're going to have quite a few clients, and you're going to need to stay on top of every single one of them. As well as that, I'd say good communication skills. You're going to need to talk to clients every day. Going to need to actually communicate also with your fellow colleagues and HMRC. So just being able to, especially ask questions. Always ask questions. If you're stuck, ask a question. Don't be afraid to communicate. That's what I'd say.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, well, we have a question. We've got some Year 12 finance students at Cornwallis that are listening in today, and they're very interested in this route, and they've asked, what grades should they be aiming for at A-level to be considered?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anywhere from sort of oh God, I don't know the numbers now.
Letters for still letters for A-levels.
Oh, is it? Excellent. Right. So, I mean, A star to a C, academic A levels. You'd be looking at sort of, if you get two of those, you can get quite good exemptions from some of the AAT papers, which can set you up quite nicely. But it isn't actually as much as I think you should try your best anyway, because you don't want to feel like you've let yourself down. It wouldn't ruin it. It might just limit the employers. So
Would one have to be maths?
Doesn't have to be maths. No, I mean, we've got people here with all sorts of A levels: history, geography, psychology. I think it's just that level of academia where it just shows you're capable, I think, of putting your head down and studying hard, really.
Brilliant, thank you. And then another great one from Tilly. If you start A4G and find that you succeed in some departments but not so much in others, does that affect your studies and exams? And then second part of the question is, are exams conducted at A4G, or does an independent company provide them?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's an independent training provider that we work alongside, and they help give feedback to us on students as well, so we can support them better. But that is done outside, but is part of your salary package at A4G. But you're absolutely right. We do find that some people excel in other in areas. You know, we might find people, I mean, we've got a couple of people here that are, you know, real tax brains, and they've actually tailored their sort of ACA qualification to actually do more of the tax papers as part of it. So it's part CTA as well, because that's where their strengths lie. And I mean, we're lucky where we do have multiple departments. We like people to get experience in everything, but certainly we do have people that end up more along the accounts route, or some trainees end up wanting to do audit and progress through to audit manager as well as accounts, and not necessarily the tax. So you do get great flexibility there. So we're firm believers in everyone needs to play to their strengths, really.
Fabulous. That was all the questions from the chat. I think that there's a couple of other people on the chat that haven't mentioned anything. Emma, have you got anything from your lads over at DGS there?
Hi,
Or,
sorry, no, they're all looking very studious. They've been making lots of notes, but no questions from me. I think they need to go away and think it all over.
Absolutely. And that's a really good segue into, if anybody's got any questions, either from, you know, people that are actually on this, or when the recording goes out, how can they get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got our contact details are all on this slide again. So do email A4G. We will be sending the recording out along with some videos from some of our other trainees as well, to give you an idea of their experience. Because we do want to be able to sort of give you as much information as we can to help you make those decisions, because, you know, it is hard. I mean, what I would say is, you know, even if you train as an accountant, you can go off and do other things later on. I think finance is just a really good basis for life and management skills, really, because money does make the world go round. So don't feel that you're sort of, you know, setting up the next 50 years of your life, but it can work out well if you do. But do get in touch. We've got details of our website. You can go on there, go to our inquiries inbox. We're happy to answer any queries people have got, and we'd certainly love to hear from you all.
Lovely. And so if they wanted to apply, that would be the CV and cover letter to recruitment at A4G.
Yeah,
email
absolutely.
address.
Or there's a link on our website. You can send your CV and cover letter to recruitment at a4g/llp.co.uk.
And just to confirm, closing date is 1st of March?
1st of March is the closing date.
Brilliant.
For yeah.
And for those that are great at tech, there's obviously the code on there to scan.
Yeah, that's it. You can do the QR code.
Brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much. I think hopefully that will give some brilliant ideas to lots of young people out there to think about accountancy, and actually sort of broaden their knowledge and bust myths of what accountancy is all about. So absolutely brilliant. And thank you ever so much for your time, Jess, because I think it's lovely to hear from sort of somebody that's, you know, going through that as we speak, because it's, you know, it's much more relevant to young people to hear it from you as you're going through it.
Yeah, that's what we thought. We thought we'd be much more interested in what Jess has got to say. So. So thanks everyone for joining us. We really appreciate it. Hopefully we've given you a bit of a broader idea of what accountancy is and where it can be really interesting for you. And good luck on your exams and thinking about your next steps. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.